Hello and welcome back to another Heatherfield Heritage video. It's a beautiful winter wonderland here at the wharf, so today we're going to take a little look at what happens when a liquid highway turns solid. As long as people have been using boats, boats have got stuck in the ice. When the Industrial Revolution kicked off, the world was still in the Little Ice Age, and every winter saw watercourses frozen hard, often hard enough to hold full-blown fairs on the ice. When Francis Egerton, Duke of Bridgewater, was building his canal, he gained stiff opposition from the existing Mersey and Irwell Navigation Company and its shareholders, who realised too late the threat he posed, and they argued that he shouldn't be granted permission to build for a number of reasons, one of the key ones being that, come winter, the still waters of a canal would freeze and be useless with even the smallest amount of ice. Egerton and his team were already well ahead of them though, and had a small fleet of icebreakers built the minute the canal had some water in it, and in the winter of 1767 they had their chance to prove their mettle. As the temperature plummeted and the waters closed in, 9 boats became trapped in the frozen river navigation at Barton despite the valiant efforts of man and beast, while high above them on the Bridgewater, a broad-stemmed boat in which 7 or 8 people who swayed her with great force as she was drawn on by a mule, and at the same time struck at any large pieces with clubs they held in their hands. Triumphantly the Duke's boat battled on through the ice, although not without a casualty. One of them was drawn against the ice till she had a hole cut in her bottom that would have sunk her had she not been immediately unladen. Icebreakers would remain virtually unchanged right through to the end of commercial traffic. Smaller than a carrying vessel and built twice the thickness, with a rounded hull that would let her be rocked violently. They would be drawn by teams of horses sourced from every stable in the vicinity, with a gang of rather brave men heaving her over from side to side. They gained propellers when motor technology arrived, but many still worked with horses or even tractors for extra oomph. The concept is simple enough. Lurching heavily from left to right as she was pulled forward, she would either split the ice at her nose straight off the bat, or she would be skidded onto the surface of the ice where her own weight would break it, and the rocking would crush the ice into more manageable pieces as she passed by. She would be closely pursued by the waiting cargo boats, whose passage would push the broken ice under itself and therefore make the channel clear. Ice can be as hard as stone and as sharp as flint, and the men faced an exciting array of dangers when they worked the icebreaker. If she found herself skidded onto the surface and the ice didn't crack as hoped, the men could be thrown out onto the frozen surface or even into the freezing water. She could be rocked too violently and filled with water, or the ice could grab her hull and tip her and her crew over. The men on the bank were no safer either. The straining horses could snap tow lines that would snap like a whip, or a man could get tangled in the spider web of lines and be crushed against the bridge arch. On the Bridgewater, icebreakers were stationed at strategic points along the canal in small tunnels. A fine example is at Lymm, and another survives at Preston Brook, although this one was converted into a cheese cellar in the 1800s. There were times when the ice was too thick for even the mightiest icebreaker. This was when it became the most dangerous, as people can't resist playing with frozen water. Walking and running onto the ice was common, and skating an obvious pastime. Some people took it further, driving horse and cart onto the ice, or riding their bikes. People would become cocky, and doctors were exasperated by the increase of broken bones from people slipping. Of course, worse would come with the thaw, people caught unaware by the weakening ice and increasing the workload of the coroner instead. Boaters themselves suffered because they could not work if the icebreaker failed. They would try and get to a boater-friendly town or village when the weather was expected to turn, somewhere where they could get provisions on the tick, as the shopkeepers knew without a shadow of a doubt that they would be paid the minute the boats were moving again. Companies tended to get their boats accounted for and retrieve those trapped in the wilds, and later on a company man could expect laying pay, a small stipend payment while the boats were laid up. Some companies would advance a boatman's wages, and some would find work on the bank or on the icebreaker herself. These boatmen, recorded in the 1960s, had vivid recollections of their experiences with the ice.
Oh, we had a job to get along. We had about a day atop of Curtis. Couldn't get through the ice. They kept breaking it and breaking it. There was no window wall to go into Bernigal and back.
I remember it when you couldn't break it.
At Stockton, we sunk the iceboat there. 3 men went down with her.
Well, they get her a boat, And there's so many men on one side and so many men on the other. And they were rocking this boat like this here with a oars that thick, you know. And somehow or other this darn thing broke. And one lot went in backwards, another went on top of. Ooh, it was terrible. But I went on the ice through the tunnel about 1893, I think it was, at Snareston. It's never been froze over since. The ice boat used to come through from Moira. It was a sailboat, and they used to have 26 horses on it at the worst periods from Derby, Midland Railway horses.
Self-employed owner boatmen, or number ones, without company safety nets were the most likely to push on as temperatures fell. George Smith recorded a meeting with one such family. On account of the frost, they had not done any work for some weeks. They looked the picture of starvation. A fireless stove and an empty locker in the cabin on a wet, wintry day are not pleasant companions for a man, wife, and 3 children. Their fast had not been broken for 20 hours. Some undoubtedly lost their lives, and the legend of Tom Beach, the number one killed on the Oxford Canal summit, may well have grown from one or more of these kind of fatalities.
The next day round the summit pound he faced the icy blast, and in the 15 bridges length he found the boats were fast. All day he tried to break the ice, but not a foot moved he. Froze up in the summit 15 miles from Banbury.
Ice was a problem for the construction and maintenance of canals too. Newspapers noted with astonishment that the Bridgewater Canal was still making progress in severe weather, and visitors to Stretford were taken aback to see great cauldrons of boiling water at the building works of the aqueduct, but it was so cold that the workmen had to carefully wash the stones in hot water before they could be laid. There were times when the weather hit back though. According to one story, a new bridge somewhere in the Dunham vicinity collapsed spectacularly when a herd of animals was sent over it, and it transpired that ice had pushed apart all the mortar, and the whole thing was only standing because it was frozen together. So what of today's canals? Although it's generally for far less time than it was in the good old days, the canals still freeze today. Usually it's only thin cat ice, but sometimes it gets far, far thicker. Boaters today have a lot more to consider before tackling heavy ice. There are no icebreakers to come to the rescue now. This is partially as they'd be a health and safety nightmare, and partially because there are only a handful of boats that truly need to keep moving large distances in the depth of winter. Modern working boats like fuel boats still battle the ice to keep other boaters supplied with the means to keep warm, but even they can find themselves forced to admit defeat when the ice is too thick or their customers' boats could be damaged by the ice that they're moving. When this happens, just like their predecessors, they too can only wait for the thaw. People still like to play on the ice too, and still have accidents just like their ancestors. We've not changed much really. That's all for today's little video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have and would like to hear more, click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our new films. You can also buy us a brew on coffee and help keep Heatherfield Heritage fueled. See you next time.
In the icy blast and the strong nor'easters roar, then we pay the price of the frost and ice in laying up and waiting for a thaw. When the credit bills in the cut-side tills are steadily increasing every day, then it's cut by half pay in cash or starve is the working boat.